Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Wonderful. All right, so good evening and welcome to the Youngstown Historical Center of Industry and Labor. My name is Jonathan Camboris, and I was recently appointed as the site manager or administrator to the museum. I am pleased to welcome first-time guests to the facility, as well as our returning patrons, our managing council members, our friends, supporters, and many community partners. When I was receiving and reviewing my thoughts on this year's exciting lecture series, I came to one becoming conclusion by words not of my own, but by author J. Donald Walters. That is, people are more important than things. I've been blessed with a very supportive team here at the YICL, and I'm proud to say that you guys are my second family. In this experience, I can relate it to this series because it has involved relationships with people, but also the work that they conducted in the labor and industry around the cultures and the parameters of those cultures, of the foodways, of just the ethnic diversity. And I am proud to go through that experience and relate it to this series because in this year alone, we have experienced the explosion of the downtown Realty Tower. And in that same vein, we were able to learn and support one another, the merchants themselves that are so proud to have supported us for so many years to launch this series in the first place. So I first wanted to express my gratitude to the entire First Ward in particular for just standing together and being strong, whether that's our arts and culture, whether that's our public services. We're proud and humble that we're a repository for that collective reasoning here. So I won't delay much longer. I wanted to introduce Dr. John Liana. He's the curator for the Youngstown Historical Center of Industry and Labor. He is an educator. He corrects my grammar more than and we have our fun here, and we are proud to work with one another. He has trained me well, and along with our other managing team here. So I'd like to offer a round of applause to Dr. John Liana, and he will go through what our day will expect.
Just remember, I'm still here.
Microphone on, or we'll leave it.
Yeah,
We'll leave it on
That's
so that
fine.
our viewers can see.
Hi, everyone. This year, the lecture series at YICL has as its theme, preserving and saving Youngstown, building community through dialogue. The main idea is for the museum to continue to stand as a beacon to the downtown, the city, and steel culture, and to restate its purpose by example, thus providing its value to the community's present and its future. We are the archivists, the researchers, writers, curators, and designers who preserve the truth of the past and the present, bring them to light, and interpret those truths for future generations without hidden agendas, socio-religious bias, or partisan politics. For more than 30 years, the YICL staff has collected photos, films, oral histories, and hard objects related to the iron and steel industries those technologies and the lives and what they have to do with the lives of everyday workers and their places in the Mahoning Valley. Why do we do this? Soon, future generations, there he is, will look to our work, as indeed they already do, for improvements to be made, which will be valuable to their lives. Some of the objects you see here, the posters, these are all parts of what we do here. Everything from Bessemer converters to Marlena Dietrich in World War II, Steelton neighborhoods, the William B. Pollock Company, and railroads in the steel mills, which is our guests' contribution. Okay. Evidence from our past helps us understand what happened and disseminate that to the broadest of possible audience. This museum designed this lecture series to offer a format where people can socially connect as well as learn of our rich history and culture, which we are determined to preserve visually as well as orally. It helps to make us who we are. A little more than 6,000 years have passed since the great chapter in our history has taken place. A mere blink of an eye. If you were to compress the whole of the Earth's history into a single calendar year, humankind only appears in the last few hours of December. And the last 6,000 years were only a few clicks of the second hand. The Bronze and Iron Ages, walled cities, kingdoms, gods, temples, empires such as Greece and Rome, the Byzantines, the Middle Ages, Crusades, the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, 2 world wars, ballistic missiles, the moon landing, and an all-inclusive vacations, reality TV, and therapy appointments via Zoom all happened once the past became simple history. In another 2,000 years, archaeologists will have something to say about the inconceivable mass of objects we've accumulated. A quick look in a kitchen drawer of any 21st century house will show you just how full our lives are of these objects and how dependent we are on them. Remember, if you're ever in doubt about what to do with that relic in the attic or basement, remember, to quote another famous archaeologist, this belongs in a museum. There's no point in trying to settle old scores with the past or whining about the future. Our road is full of achievements with more than our fair share of unavoidable mistakes. All of it's thanks to those who came before us. It's our job to do our best and make sure there are people here after us. Our mission states to collect, preserve, and interpret industrial and labor history of the Mahoning Valley, the region, and the state of Ohio. Our vision, keeping Ohio alive, relevant, and interesting. Marcus Aurelius wrote almost 2,000 years ago in his Meditations, "Does the light of a lamp shine without losing its splendor until it's extinguished? And shall truth, justice, and temperance be extinguished before your time. Steel culture. It's in your blood. Tonight, the museum welcomes one of our own, Stephanie Godsey. She has been a researcher here at the museum for the past few years and is currently an administrative assistant at the Mahoning Valley Historical Society. Her topic this evening is about the shutdown of the mills and the demise of the steel industry in the valley and its impact on Latino culture. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Stephanie Godsey.
Okay, thank you, John. Hey, can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. All good? Well, so my name is Stephanie Godsey. I am a Youngstown resident, born and raised. Currently, I am a student in the MA program at the University of Akron for Applied History, and there is a public humanities component that goes along with that as well. I will be graduating on December 14th of 2024, so I'm excited about that. Thank you. Thank you. After 3 long semesters, I'm a third of the way done with my third one, so third and final. So I'm a lifelong zip, of course. I obtained my bachelor's in history and a certificate of museums and archive studies also from the University of Akron. So a little bit of background about the project that I'm going to be presenting to everyone. University of Akron professor, Dr. Wilson, he teaches our graduate seminar class this semester. So back in the fall of 2023, he had discussed hiring 2 University of Akron graduate students from the MA program to assist him on a transnational project that he was working on called the Deindustrialization and the Politics of Our Time, DEPO for short. So we had a little bit of a discussion about the Black digital humanities in our class and underrepresented voices in the communities. So I had mentioned something about, you're doing your project on deindustrialization. There's a large amount of Puerto Rican steelworkers, migrants that came to Youngstown specifically to work in the steel industry, and they succumbed to a lot of the demise that came with it. So after that semester ended, Dr. Wilson touched base with me in January of this year and said, hey, if you want to jump on board with this project, please do so. He and another professor who is here tonight, Dr. James Rhodes, who is a professor of sociology, correct? Yep, at Hiram College, is also a co-investigator lead on this project as well, called Race, Populism, and the Left Initiative. So a little bit about the DEPO project. It is funded by the SSHRC, which is the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council in Canada. So there's 33 partnerships and 24 co-applicants and collaborators that are across 6 different countries, 2 in North America, which are the United States and Canada, and 4 in Europe, which are England or the United Kingdom, Italy, Germany, and France. So when I was doing a little bit of the research on this project, I thought about, I have a capstone coming up in the fall for graduation. Would it be okay if I did this for my public humanities component? And I touched base with Dr. Jody Cairns, who is the director of the Cummings Center for the History of Psychology at the University of Akron. And she was on board with it. So she said, absolutely. As long as you're doing a public-facing component, you're good to go. So that's why I decided to do this. So we'll get into my project, which is Race and Industry and Deindustrialization and the Puerto Rican Perspective. So this photo was one of very little, I'll say, that I could find to present with. And it actually comes during when my Puerto Rican migrants came to the United States mainly Youngstown, Ohio, which was in 1951. So this photo is courtesy of the Youngstown Historical Center of Industry and Labor here, and I found it on ohiomemory.org. So I'll get a little bit into that, but the photo says, pardon my, I don't speak very good Spanish. I am half Puerto Rican though, so you'd think I'd brush up on that. But so the top, piensa y vive, is, I had it here, think and live. And then the bottom is do not cross between the cars. So this was a little bit of a safety feature that Youngstown Sheet and Tube posted on the side of their building, because the Spanish migrant workers, one of the things that they had trouble with when they first migrated here was the language barrier. So they wanted to make sure that their safety was just as good as everybody else's. So and that's one of the only photos that I could find of Puerto Rican steelworkers. So how did industry lead to Puerto Rican migrant labor? Some of the things I found upon my research was that the steel industry was booming during World War II. So your tanks, anything, the metals that were used for the bullets and the bombs and everything that happened in World War II that was needed caused the steel industry to boom. It still stayed booming after World War II, so which created many labor opportunities in U.S. factories. So for to outsource to these different countries, Puerto Rico was one of the few that was suggested. So the Puerto Ricans became a cheap source of labor following World War II, and a lot of them migrated to larger cities at first before landing in Lorain, Ohio and Youngstown, Ohio. So the Great Migration occurred in the late 1940s. A lot of them came to the area, the Youngstown area in 1951. It was established. And that migration continued all the way into the 1960s, which I found out that my grandfather, Juan Rosario, was one of the ones that came after 1956 to work at Youngstown Sheet and Tube. Also, many Puerto Rican laborers left their farm work to pursue these opportunities in the United States. So there wasn't many agricultural jobs that they could get into at the time. So by word of mouth, it ended up being, hey, these steel industries and these large factories needed all this work. Would you be interested in working? So they did. So when they first came here, they had to adjust to a new life in the United States. The men were the first to arrive following World War II in 1945. Like I said before, they migrated to larger cities first, like New York and Detroit. Then they traveled to Lorain and Youngstown in search of the industrial work. Once they secured work and housing, then they would send for their families to come up to Youngstown. They had a hard time adjusting geographically and culturally at first, meaning they're coming from tropical climate up to a much colder climate. So trying to be able to find clothing that was appropriate for the winter weather. And a lot of them came up in January of 1951. So trying to adjust to that. Culturally also, the language barrier was especially difficult. You're speaking a different language and trying to understand, even though Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States, at the time, it was hard for them to understand what they were trying to say and get their point out there. Their food as well. They had a hard time finding all the ingredients that they needed to cook their food. And they used like all the different spices and rice, beans, pork probably wasn't too hard to find, but some of their Goya spices that they would use were difficult to find especially. But they also experienced some discrimination at work and in the community as well. So discrimination at work and in the community. Puerto Ricans were discriminated in both. So we're going to start with the work first. When they first got here, the jobs that they had were not the most satisfying at first. They wanted anything that can help them make money in order to support their families, in order to have that support to bring their families over here. So a lot of the jobs were filthy and dangerous. Although the union did establish those safety markers, such as the first picture that I showed, they were still not put in the best positions. A lot of those jobs were low paying, and the Puerto Ricans, with the language barrier especially, didn't know how to ask about getting raises or fair pay in this. So some of the attitudes from non-Hispanic workers, whites mainly, on helping out and sharing their tools and other equipment with them, didn't make the Puerto Ricans feel like they were wanted or welcome in the steel mills. Also, they still felt little to no representation from the unions until about the 1970s and beyond. So then community also, they felt discriminated in. Housing was a big issue because they're coming to this new area. They don't have anywhere to live. So there was a bunch of steel worker housing in Struthers, Camel, mainly in the south side of Youngstown at the time, and going into the neighborhoods to try and afford a house. Like the housing was crowded to begin with, so there was people living on top of people, kind of like a slum area. But in the neighborhoods as well, they were discriminated against. A lot of the landlords that own these houses would have to ask their non-Hispanic neighbors, is it okay that these people are moving in next to you? And once they got that okay, then they would allow that. In the schools, when their children finally came over, or if their children were even born in the United States at the time, the language barrier was one thing, but in the schools, kids felt that discrimination. They could be friends with, for example, their schoolmates, but then outside of the schools, it was looked down upon for them to socialize. Even in the churches, the Puerto Rican community, Puerto Rican people, I should say, are very religious Catholics. So they had a hard time finding a church to establish to go to. So what they did was they found these churches that would accept them, that did provide Spanish-speaking masses, but they had to have them in the basement. They weren't allowed to have them in the top and main sanctuary. So I think that paved a way in the future for St. Rose to come along. So we're going to move into the auto industry a little bit because there's some similarities between what the Puerto Ricans experienced in the steel mills as in the auto industry. So a lot of the adult children of the steel workers are the ones that found work in GM Lordstown in the 1970s. I believe Lordstown was established in 1968. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that it? 66? 66, thank you. So they ended up finding work after graduation in high school. A lot of them had turned 18 when they moved here by 1969. So the early 70s, they found work there. Like I said before, the discrimination was also present in the auto industry in getting jobs and the pay that was offered. They started out with the low paying jobs and the less appealing jobs, you can say. And women workers were coming into the force as well. And they especially felt this from all over. But many of the workers in the assembly, many of them worked in the assembly plant. But one of the most appealing jobs that they could get was as a painter. And some of the oral histories that I listened to for GM Lordstown, I believe the Steel Museum has 2 of them on hand. The one gentleman, I think it was Mr. Ocasio, the photographer, he had a job as a painter, and he said he stuck with it for the longest time because it was one of the best jobs. It was not a hard job at all, but it was a good paying job, and he enjoyed working there for that. So it was favored by those who could actually get into that job. So the union continuously fought for rights at GM. There was some union support there for all nationalities, not just Latinos. Another thing too is with the job positions, very few Puerto Ricans actually became supervisors. So it was very rare that they can actually work their way up to the top, even having been there for so many years. A lot of them retired, same thing in the steel mills, after 30 years of working. So now we come to deindustrialization. So it created some social and economic hardships among Puerto Ricans. Jobs were being scarce due to competitiveness and discrimination as well after the deindustrialization occurred. Many of them were also low-paying jobs. Pensions weren't guaranteed even after the steel mills were closed. So they started closing on Black Monday, 1977, September 19th. They did offer a lot of the Puerto Rican workers jobs in other mills. I think Warren was one of them. But a lot were also forced into retirement due to their age. And most of them had been working there already for at least 25 to 30 years. In the auto industry, it was kind of the same, although Lordstown's demise came in 2019. And after Lordstown shut down, many of the jobs were outsourced to Mexico and Korea, and those wanting to stay in the US were actually offered job transfers out of state to Michigan and Tennessee. So one of the things that I did for this project, which I think is very important, and when you're preserving history, is doing an oral history with someone. Writing down information is good to have because you can store it in the archives. You can digitize those copies. But I think by doing oral histories, you're going to get more of that emotion, more of that feeling about what these people experienced. And they're going to talk about their lives, which I think is pretty interesting. I know James and I did an oral history with my mom's cousins, Felipe and Mary Gonzalez, and their friend Andy Torres. Felipe worked for Lordstown. Andy, I believe, worked for Lordstown as well. And then my great uncle worked in the steel mills, along with my grandfather at Youngstown Sheet and Tube. So a lot of the steel workers aren't living anymore, or they're going to be really old and up in age to where they're not going to have that collective memory that they once had. YSU did an oral history conduction in 1994, which was super helpful in listening to what the actual steelworkers had to say. So I appreciated that research. Thank you, Susan, for that, for letting us listen to those. But that helped guide a narrative for this whole project as well. I know that discrimination existed, but some experienced it a little more than others. And a lot of them stayed silent when they were working in the steel mills. As I mentioned before, it was maybe the language barrier and that they didn't feel comfortable coming to somebody because of that language barrier. Or if they did end up learning English, that, hey, I'm the other person. I'm going to stay quiet. I'm going to be low key, and I'm not going to interfere with anything. I'm just here to make my money, support my family, and that's that. But when we interviewed the children, who happened to be Philip and Mary Gonzalez and Andy Torres, who worked for GM Lordstown, a lot of these jobs, they saw what their parents went through working in the steel mills, their fathers especially. They didn't want their children to work for an industry like that. They wanted them to move on. But this was the late 60s. But then the same thing happened with the following generation. The children that are now working in the auto industry saw their children grow up in the 80s and 90s. They didn't want them to experience what they experienced in the steel mill or the auto industry. They wanted them to go on to either enroll in the service or go to college and get a degree and get a job that was non-industry related. But one thing I learned from doing this capstone project the importance of oral histories, because not everything happens to be written down. So the memories spoken about serve as valuable resources for future research endeavors. And I think that we do have the recorded of Mary and Philip available. So hopefully that'll help. My mom, unfortunately, is battling cancer, so she's not able to provide me as much information as she could, but she did provide a little bit on when my grandparents came here. They were married in 1956. They migrated to Puerto Rico in 1956. My grandfather got a job in Youngstown Sheet and Tube, 1960. My mom was born in 1959. So he retired when the mill shut down in 1977 on Black Monday. And then a lot of them, I don't think I mentioned this already, but a lot of the steel workers, when they retired or were forced into retirement, a lot of them decided to migrate back to their original country. So a lot of them went back to Puerto Rico and lived comfortably. I know my grandparents left. My uncle was the last to graduate from Campbell Memorial, so he graduated in 1979. So that was 3 years before I was born. So my grandparents had already moved back to Puerto Rico in 1980. So, but we used to go visit them a lot when I was a kid, which was nice. But yeah, like John said, also growing up in the Youngstown, you bleed steel. It's all a part of your growing up and your history. And I think it should be preserved by conducting these oral histories. Maybe finding out if people have old photos that they can provide, not be shy and bring them forward. The Steel Museum and VHS as well would love to have those collections, because this is one voice that is definitely underrepresented in the community. And I'm glad that we were able to work on this project when we did. And with the demise of all of the recent auto industry going out, it was able to help us form this narrative for the Puerto Rican perspective. So, thank you. Yes, questions, Susan?
Sorry,
Yeah.
Did any of them ever say they regretted coming to Ohio or just up north here in general?
No, they didn't. Mm-mm.
Were even with the discrimination or anything, they never regretted it?
Nope. Yeah. And we only did the 3 interviews down here, James and I did. Dr. Wilson interviewed my father-in-law's cousin, who's Puerto Rican. She's in Lorain County. So her brother, I believe, worked for the steel industry, and then her sister worked for Ford, I think it was. Yeah. So that wasn't, I don't know if they provided some information, but I don't know if they were comfortable like speaking about it. And that's why we're trying to get into the communities and be able to help them provide these oral histories, so that way we can preserve them down the road. So in case anybody wants like the future history of, hey, this happened back then, like what can we do about it now? Closing that gap. So, but thank you. Good question. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I am particularly impressed with the ideas that you put in about oral histories and memories. If you have people that can contribute to this material, I urge you to get them to NVHS or to us and get this down in either writing or orally to preserve it for future generations, like that young man sitting up there. Because there are many young men like him who may one day not know unless we preserve this material. That's what we're about.
And we started him young. He loves going to museums, and then
That is strong.
yes, so yeah. And Dante over here works for MVHS also. He is the education director. So, and he travels to the elementary schools for the suitcase program and speaks to these young kids. And When my son recognized him in our newsletter recently, he said, "That's Mr. Dante. We learned about Native Americans. We learned about steel industry and all." And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. So thank you, Dante, for doing that. Because like you said, John, the future generation is right here and they need to be able to.
They hear more than you think.
Yes, they do. So, but thank you. Rebecca, you had a question? Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
And my grandpa, Frank Lopez, on my mom's side, he worked in steel mills, and you helped me connect some dots because we didn't see him very much. There was like
Oh,
friction between him and my mom, so
yeah.
growing up, I didn't see him much, but he was from Puerto Rico. She tells me she was born in New York, lived in New York as a baby toddler, and then they lived in Lorraine, Elyria, area.
My husband's from Elyria, so yes.
So that
Yep.
helped me because she said, I talk to her a lot now, and she'll say, he was really quiet, so when he came home, he was tired. You know?
Yeah.
They, when she lived in Lorraine, she remembered they had pigs, they had things, they grew, so it seems like they carried over that from their culture and their country. But she said, you know, the parents didn't talk much.
Hmm.
Her mother was his, first wife, but she didn't know about Spanish. So a lot of that, like, it's gaps.
Yeah.
I can see more like, but one interesting thing when you're saying about supervisors, she said in his obituary,
Hmm.
he said he was a supervisor.
Yeah, very rarely.
Up in Lorraine.
Ooh, nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I think about them often,
Mhm.
and my other grandpa was from Mexico, my grandma was from Cuba, and they lived right in San Paulo. You know, when you're growing up and busy with children, all kinds of things, you don't think that much, but now I have more time, like, how was it for them walking downtown? How was it with the language barrier? You know, I feel so much for them.
Hmm.
Yet they taught me, you know, when people say you're nice, you just, I give it all to them.
Aw, that's really
Thank
sweet.
you, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
I
Thank
just
you.
listen to my grandpa Lopez now.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah, my mom is Puerto Rican. She's first generation Puerto Rican American born here, as were my aunts and my uncle. Both my grandparents were born in San Lorenzo, Puerto Rico. Um, but like you said, a lot of them are very hardworking people. They worked in farms. I think there was a sugarcane farm in one of the oral histories we listened to. Um, the father of one of the steelworkers that came over here in the migration in 1951. So they're hardworking people, but like you said, they had that good work ethic. They did their jobs, they did them good. They just didn't have the appreciation that they should have gotten back then. So, but yes, I do agree with that. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Jacob?
Recently came across anything about the relationship with the African American community, just something they also faced racism from the mills and unions, and was there any like solidarity or kind of opposing with the racist structure at all?
So there was one thing in one of the oral histories that we listened to in regards to African Americans. I believe the one gentleman had said, it was back in the 1994 oral histories that YSU conducted, and he said that Puerto Ricans did experience a little more discrimination than African Americans at the time. I don't know, that could have been his point of view, because like a lot of them lived in the Camel area, south side of Youngstown, and the east side. So they grew up with the African American communities. But I didn't see anything else about that in there. So that's something I can actually work on looking into. So, Martha?
I was going to say that part of the answer to that is language.
Yes.
In a workplace,
Language.
people who could speak English would be favored over people who were struggling.
Hmm.
And that's not a new problem in the 1950s. It goes back into the 20s and the
Yep.
teens as well.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you. John?
It may also have had to do with timing. the African-American community was already semi-well entrenched in society, okay? And a lot of the Puerto Rican Latino community was recent arrivals.
Yes.
So they experienced the same thing that the African Americans did at the beginning,
Right.
okay? And it kind of, and with the shutdowns, when they were, it cut that off of them becoming a mainstream,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Which is why, you know, your Latino communities would experience more discrimination. I hate to say it.
They're the newcomers in this, and they're
Right.
the other.
They're the
Yeah.
newcomers.
Yes.
And even the African Americans were like, uh-oh.
Yes. Yes.
Okay?
Especially in the houses, I think in Struthers is where it occurred as well. So,
Oh, yeah.
yep. But thank you. Yeah.
Going back to what John just said, I've seen it now with our new college students here.
Yes.
People are discriminating against them, saying mean things, and I ride the buses a lot.
Mhm.
They ride the buses, and there's always trouble. They do this, and it's, they're under accidentally, so it's very sad.
It
It's
is.
important to do all this, like you said, now they're the ones who don't have, they're good at English, but sometimes they don't, it doesn't translate to what the idioms and things.
Right. Right.
So I've seen it breaks my heart because they're like the kindest, hardworking, educated,
Mhm.
minded people. So it's so important to have these conversations.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And perhaps we realize this now with the newest wave, okay, from the Eastern Mediterranean, from the Arabian countries, okay? You see one, you see them all. Not true. But that's the way, that's the division now that happens in our country. And it has been so for many years because of
Yeah.
the events that happen.
Mhm.
9/11, things like this.
Mhm.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all that way. That everyone was that way,
Right.
okay? And I have a good friend who works, he's older. His children were students of mine when I taught at the university. Okay. He runs a market. Stereotype. But he's the nicest guy. There's no reason to think that he would be involved in a terrorist plot. Okay? Much as they would like you to think that now. That's not the point. People have reason. People learn to need to use that, to learn to use the reason to get rid of the lies and see the truth. And they did after every wave of immigration here.
Mhm.
I love the way you pointed that out, the way that
Thank you.
worked it even into your final summary.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And another note for that also, my mom's house, after my grandparents moved back to Puerto Rico, they gave it to my aunt. So my aunt and her husband and my cousins all live there. Do you know the Kings?
I don't.
No. Oh, that's right. You went to Boardman. I'm sorry. They went to, yes, in the Greek community. Yep. And so it's on Palmer Avenue. If you're coming up from Wilson, you go up the hill. It's the second house on the left-hand side is my mom's house. The house next to them were African Americans, and I grew up with them because we would always be at my aunt's house. It's my mom's sister. One of the best families. Grandma Bay and Grandpa Benny were amazing people. I don't know what their jobs were, what they did beforehand, because they were elderly at the time, but I played with their grandkids. We were all friends. And that was back at a time like the 1980s that were amazing. Like everybody got along with everybody pretty much. And these neighborhoods, they saw that demise in the night, like towards the end of the 80s into the 90s. And going past that house, taking my son to his doctor at Akron Children's in Camel, I said, let's take a trip down memory lane and go past Grandma Mary's old neighborhood. Grandma Bay and Grandpa Benny's house is no longer there. And they were right next to my grandparents' house. And there was, I think, a project housing right across the street, project apartments that are no longer there. It's all greenery. So it's like some of these houses in Camel are just being torn down. And it's sad to see, like, you felt safe. Like when I was a kid, we walked up to Vacation Bible School, my cousins and I, at this little Baptist church that was off the beaten path. My aunt was like, you got your cousins with you. You got older boys who are like built like linebackers going up there. You and your brother are good. And we were. We went up to Vacation Bible School. Our main church was St. Rose when I was a kid growing up. My father was Czechoslovakian and Polish, and he married a Puerto Rican woman, and he went to her church. So it was nice being able to be a part of the St. Rose community when it was still around. And the Ola Fest is amazing. I'm glad they brought something back for the Hispanic community around here, because I remember as a kid going to St. Rose to those festivals as a kid, and I'm getting chills about talking about it. So it's like bringing back those good memories. And then that's why, like, the oral histories, these people like to talk about their bad memories, of course, but they also present their good memories, and that can help us in the history process in preserving this. What's up, Jacob? Yeah, you're good. What's up?
Most of the migrants say they use air travel.
Yes. Yes, air travel. Yep. A lot of them, and I was reading in one of the recent scholarships, I think it was in 2017, one of the books that I had, and it was about migration and the Puerto Ricans specifically. They flew by plane here. And one of the stories that was in there was when the men were over here working to bring their wives and children over, they mentioned 2 teenage girls that were waiting for their father to come to the airport and how scary that was for them. So I wondered the same too. How did they get over here? And by plane, I think, was for these children to see that. But yeah, they did travel over by plane. So, yep. Anybody else? What's up? Oh, yeah. Is this yours? Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. Thank you. Yeah, what's up?
Okay, can everyone hear me? So our online community, thank you also for tuning in.
Thank you.
These sound really fantastic. I just had a sneak peek in the office to hear, and they can hear loud and clear everything that's going on. So this
Fantastic.
is a wonderful progressive move for us to incorporate more video conferencing and online community building. There's a bunch of things. My thoughts go wild when it comes to ethnic history.
Yeah.
Me being Greek, of course, as we, comfortably say, because our families originated from like similar landing places. So Camel is basically my second home. My Yaya is still there, and she's currently at the Greek festival, probably overextending herself as all of those generation. I mean, they're just so passionate for their culture, right? And you're experiencing that with your family and through other people's oral histories.
Yeah.
So I'd first like to relate to you in a way by saying the location that your family settled in. Mine was down the hill off of Wilson and Robinson, and the first little tiny alley that doesn't exist anymore was Washington Street. And that was I don't know much yet to fully encompass that social history. But what I can say about my experience is from just listening to the soft-spokenness of my grandfather, who basically said, okay, company housing was sort of just over the corner. And we have an example of what that might have looked like in our exhibit here.
Mhm.
And I always asked my grandfather, once I started learning more about this, I said, explain what your dwelling place was like versus one that was across the street. And he said, basically, it was the same, but that they all came from different cultures at different times. And so they landed in the same situation where once, you grew within the industry. So your complaints were less because you just wanted to go through, support your family, and go on to that next level.
Yep.
So that resiliency is there throughout the ethnic history of all of our cultures that have landed here. And as rich as the Greek culture may seem to the public, as you're experiencing in the same way as that representation as Puerto Rican culture, from the outside, it seems so rich. We're all here together. But there are still things within the culture that they are still dealing with, and reasons why oral histories are not being taken and histories are not being written. And this is a very prime example, a first wave, if you will, a revolutionary attribute that you've basically just accomplished by overall explaining what is going on in the industry and the partners that the group that you're working with in your research. So number one, I officially would like to welcome a round of applause to Stephanie because she's
Thank
doing a
you.
wonderful job.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, buddy.
And I also, as a PSA, wanted to mention just some of the Hispanic Heritage Month activities that you're a part of. And so we appreciate that.
Thank you.
One of the interesting and the I guess you could say the biggest celebration is the Hispanic Heritage Celebration, Saturday, October 12th from 12 to 3 at the Chestnut Room. It's going to be a Colombian dance ensemble.
Ooh.
So very interesting. We have an entire pamphlet that is right by the exit there. For our online
you, Dr.
listeners,
Planning.
this is also available
Yeah.
online through YSU. I believe Anna Torres has placed all of these online, so we're very appreciative
Nice.
for our online community. But Grimilda, have you met Stephanie outside of this lecture before?
We did not. Thank you. Frank, yes, he was yes.
Shots of what you were saying.
Oh, thank
To
you.
the family, to the Ocasio family.
Yes,
So,
thank
yeah, they were
you.
really interested because they couldn't come. I said, you're
Aw.
lost because I'm here and this is wonderful.
Well, thank you. Yes, his oral history is up there. It was
Yes.
conducted in 2001 for the
Okay.
auto industry portion of this.
Oh, okay.
And a little side note also, my mom used to get family pictures done through him.
Aw.
So when we were
That's
younger,
wonderful to hear.
yeah.
Yes. I didn't talk to him. He hasn't responded, but I'm sure I'll get a
Aw.
phone call tonight.
Aw, I
From
hope
either him
so.
or his wife.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you.
So Stephanie, a little collaboration here because I'm an opportunist.
Yes.
Grimilda, you represent a big pillar in the community with OCA. Could you explain a little bit about what OCA is and how we can try to integrate some of Stephanie's research into getting to that step of this collection and really enhancing it?
I would just recommend that you contact the director, Angelica Diaz.
Yes.
She
okay.
is the one that you would reach out to if you wanted to set up an event
Mhm.
where you could do some oral history interviews. I'm sure that's something that she would be willing to do. OCA, as many of you know, or for those of you who don't, is the local Hispanic and Multicultural Center in the community. And it's at 3660 Shirley Road. And so, yeah, it's a wonderful community center and they do a lot. So yeah, I would suggest that you reach Angelica Diaz and I'll let her know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I
Oh,
appreciate
you're
that.
welcome.
Yes, and our Mahoning Valley Historical Society, the Mahoning Valley Cultural Alliance, is having its
Exactly.
monthly dinner on
And that's
October
the-
7th at OCA.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, they
Yep.
are. And Dr. Alvaro Ramirez is going to be here at the Steel Museum on October the 11th.
I did see that, yes.
Yeah, and we have Mateo Blanco, an artist, a Colombian artist, who will be at the Butler Institute of American Art this Sunday from 12 to 3, I believe. It's not on the flyer, but it's 1 to 3 where you can come and meet the artist. And it's this Sunday at the Butler as well. He'll have an exhibit there. So you're invited to
Thank
all of
you.
these events. They're free.
Now,
Thank you.
I should contact Angelica directly. Does she have an administrative? Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And Stephanie, before I walk away from Grimilda, do you have any questions for her?
I don't believe so at the time. So, but thank you.
I
So-
have one last note,
Yes.
and Susan here is a component to our Ohio History Connection. She's our archivist, and she has been corresponding with some individuals locally as well as through Columbus on certain things, and she's going to tell you a little bit about that.
Well, not so much locally, but what it is that Cameron Wood, our oral history coordinator from Ohio History Connection in Columbus, he is doing a oral history interviews. The 14th is at Loghurst in Boardman, Canfield, excuse me. And the second, that's right, I had to think about that. And then the second one, it will be the 15th, conducted here at the museum.
Nice.
I believe it's like all morning or something, like 9 to 5. I believe he'll be taking, reservations. And I don't remember how to get a hold of him directly. So if anybody is interested, go ahead and contact me and I will pass your information on to him. What he's focusing on is anybody who would like to talk about the shutdowns. I also know he's interested in the Youngstown Mafia. So if anybody out there wants to share that with him as well. But yeah, so oral histories, as Stephanie can contest that, yeah, it's extremely helpful. It helped her with her research and to develop it and make it stronger, which obviously we can tell that it worked. So yeah, it's important. So if anybody's interested, get a hold of me as Susan Lowry here at the museum and I will forward. My extension is 330-941-1433, or you can email me at slowery@ohiohistory.org, and then I can directly send your information to Cameron. Okay, thank you, John.
Thank you.
you.
And thank you to Stephanie. I appreciate it. I just felt like
Thank you. And
I felt
would
like I could not walk
go ahead.
away without trying to incorporate the room. So I appreciate our audience too as well.
Yes, thank you for all that came. And I would also like to extend my thank yous also, my family, my husband Matt and my son Caden as well for being super patient with me on this whole adventure. December 14th, it's going to be done. No, Jacob, I'm not going for my PhD. I'm sorry. He tried already. So I was like, I give you all the credit in the world as well for doing that. And I hope you're almost done too. Oh, you'll get there. Our neighbors from Akron. But I would also like to thank James for allowing me to be a research assistant on this main project for Depot. And Dr. Wilson, who couldn't be here tonight because he was actually at Kent this morning, he co-authored a book for Kent State about the Kent State shooting. Oh, did you see him?
Wow.
No? Yes. Oh, very good. Yeah, I couldn't make it because I had to work. So, but I was like, everything went well with it. And oh, good. He is.
The other author that was there.
Ooh.
3 authors who wrote Penn State books.
Yeah.
He gave a whole bunch.
Good. Yeah, he's well versed on his Ohio history. So, and focusing on like the Kent State area, Akron area as well. So, but yeah, and James, again, thank you. I appreciate this. So, and eventually our research that we've done It's going to be turned into either a book chapter or an article. A book chapter. So next year, right? 2025. Oh, 26. Yeah.
Publish.
James and Dr. Wilson are the main ones. But I appreciate letting me work on this with you guys. So thank you. And saving the best for last. But the wonderful people here at the Youngstown Steel Museum, Susan, John, Jonathan, amazing people. I met them a little over 2 years ago. And for my first capstone on my museums and archives certificate. And I, like John said, I'm one of you guys. So, and I will continue to be. And Susan, you've been extremely helpful, like from the beginning on this project. So I really do appreciate that. And you're invited to come with me on November 25th, where this is going to be turned into a poster. And we're presenting, there's 9 of us in my cohort. We are the first cohort of the new improved Master in Applied History and Public Humanities at the University of Akron. The program was done away with after 2018, I believe, or maybe 2018 was the last group that they allowed. 2016, thank you. Yes, yep. But we're glad to have it back, and I was proud to be part of the first cohort. So,
November 25th.
yes. So what it is we're going to present all of our capstones on a poster. And it's going to be at the College of Arts and Sciences. And we're allowed to have a representative with us for the institution that we worked with on our projects. So, November 25th, but yeah, they're going to create posters for all of us. And we'll be able to present them that way. And then 20-page paper that's due on December 11th for this. So, which I'll have been started this coming Monday. But is there anything else? I'm very grateful for everyone. So thank you for coming. Oh, yes, Grimelda.
Can you just put the picture that you have?
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't see the shot of that.
Yeah, no worries.
You might have something else to the news.
Yeah.
So I found that in the bulletin, which was the newsletter that came out for Youngstown Sheet and Tube. They issued them monthly. And it was very hard to find any pictures of Puerto Rican steel workers. And this was the only one. There is another one similar to this. And it's 4 guys standing outside. Their names are at the bottom of the article as well. And I believe one of them is from San Lorenzo, where my grandparents are from. And so yeah, as soon as I found that the other day, I ran and told Susan, I was like, I found a picture. I was so excited. Because that was one of the other things too, like when you want to present these oral histories, photos are a big help too. And if anybody had any photos that would, like I'm already going through my mom's photos at home and I haven't been able to find anything like on my grandpa, but yeah, it's, I found it on ohiomemory.org, which is an extension of the Ohio History Center or Connection, OHC. So, yep. So, and then you guys provided that picture, submitted it on the OHC for digitization. So, yes, I was very grateful that I found that one and the other one. The other one was it was, I believe, an Akron newspaper, like a newsletter. I can't think of the name of it offhand, but it was also from 1951 as well, in front of the same safety sign that was up there. Sheet and tube. Mm-hmm. Yep. Youngstown. Yeah.
The date was prior to 51.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen anything in Spanish.
No, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I did see a picture with a bunch of, I don't know if it was the safety rules, but it was for sheet and tube, and it was in all different languages. I think Latin may have been one of them, but I didn't see any Spanish on there at the time. What's that? It's downstairs. Yes. Yeah, it's downstairs. Yep. Yes. Yay! She will be my go-to. Thank you. But yeah, it was, like I said, it was hard to find some photos, but even at MVHS, I went down there earlier today. on my lunch break and to see if we had anything, and I didn't see anything either. But it would be good to get the community out there and, hey, if you have these photos, please bring them forth. And like the oral histories as well would be a wonderful thing. Yes, Martha.
I thought on context of photos.
Mhm.
You'll find whatever the company took photos of for their use in their newsletters. You're very unlikely to find any place personal photographs because you were not permitted to have cameras in the mills.
Right. Didn't
Yeah.
Sheet and Tube have their own photographer at the time?
They have an industrial photographer
Yep.
on staff, and they
Mhm.
took pictures of their processes, their machinery, their products. Occasionally, there were workers in the image.
Mhm.
The workers weren't the center of like you were taking a picture of the sign and they were there, they put them in. But the industrial photographer was from the company perspective. The individual workers were not permitted to bring personal cameras in to take pictures inside
Of
the
them.
gate.
Mhm.
And I've had different gentlemen over the years tell me this when we were looking at strike photo scrapbooks or things
yeah.
like that. I worked up in the archives.
Yep.
And that was specifically said more than once, like, oh no, you weren't allowed, you would get fired if you had a camera, your personal camera, because you weren't allowed to take pictures of any company property for anything. That was only the company allowed to do that. So you're not likely to find personal photos of the guys at work. Sometimes at company picnics, if the company had a picnic for their employees or a recreation day at Idora Park or something like this, you might find personal photos of the workers having fun, but it was outside of the plant.
Mhm.
Just, perspective that they.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, through the early 60s, that would have been a security risk.
It was a security thing.
Yep.
It was, and also it was on the picket lines.
Yeah.
You weren't allowed to take pictures if you were on strike and on the picket lines.
Right.
on company property.
Nope.
You couldn't do that. I had a couple of guys go, it's not a few, but that was in the 80s and 90s. And they were
Bootleg.
very cautious about it. Yeah, before smartphones. You had to have permission. Yeah, I do have one
Cool.
collection of things from a gentleman who took pictures of was the U.S. Steel's metallurgy lab just before they were tearing it down. He was a professional photographer in addition to being an employee, but he went and got specific permission from the company to document the end of the lab. He didn't try to do it on the slide. So, yeah. Things that we take for granted in
Right.
the 21st century.
Yes.
That weren't that way in the 20th century.
Nope.
And
I have one last remaining comment. Grimilda, I'm wondering if there's a way throughout the course of Hispanic Heritage Month that there could be some kind of public service announcement that we need things. We need oral histories or anything, any ephemera that one might have to augment the story. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate your
Give a round
time.
of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is one of the most liveliest conversations that we've had during the entire history of the Speakers Series. I want to invite her personally back to start the conversations again at any time. Okay? There's plenty of food left. There's plenty of wine left.
I will have a glass. I just.
Oh, there you go. All right, so she's already staged. Thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. And you guys start the conversation together. Come again.
Yes, I appreciate all the.
Our next presenter will be Brooke Bobbin from the Arms. And she'll be discussing. She'll be discussing Arms himself and the building that just got torn down. That was where his office was. Okay. So please come next month. It's all great, sparking a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Is he a Spartan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I play Boardman Spartans football.
Here, I'll take a picture of you guys first. Uno, dos, tres. All right, you guys want to indulge me? So yes. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Thank you guys so much for coming. Rebecca, it's such a treat. Well, thank you for enjoying it. That's what really matters. Yeah. Oh, I understand.
Everybody should take food home. We got saran wrap.